Hi witches! So today we are going to be discussing and kind of piggybacking off of yesterday's topic where I talked about like how to start working on things and hopefully like assuage some fears about being an expert right away about witchcraft, because I know that's something I definitely struggle with, like no matter what topic I'm thinking about or talking about or learning about. I'm not an expert after reading like one thing on it. Why not? I am trash. But that's definitely something we don't want to perpetuate within witchcraft because it's not true. But today I wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about how to personalize your craft to yourself. I just think it's really important that your spirituality is fulfilling and that you aren't getting any ideas that you have to have a practice exactly like mine or like any other witches that you see on the internet. Now, again, a lot of that can serve hopefully as an inspiration. I do try to give like fun tips and stuff, or like give maybe alter design ideas, which we'll be talking about a little bit later this week actually. But I do want to kind of like talk about how you can personalize everything, because that's like the great thing about witchcraft. Yeah, you might have certain symbols that are like the same across the board, like the pentacle or the triquetra, the Celtic knot, or Thor's hammer and stuff. Sure, that is definitely for sure like valid, but you can go about decorating the rest of your altar and finding items that are sacred to your practice in a way that makes it all uniquely yours. So I want to talk about that today. So the first thing that I want to touch on is that we all have our own origin stories. Depending on the household that you grew up in, depending on the country or climate or environment that you grew up in, our practices kind of, I feel like, reflect that. So if you do some soul searching or are really interested in getting down to the root of like why you want to practice witchcraft, maybe look to the past a little bit, not to dwell on the past, but think about the things that you found magical as a child. Were you really into fairies and the fae? Maybe that's a call for like to go to green magic. Conversely, if maybe you were into like Harry Potter, you'll be more into the academia side of learning witchcraft and the research portion of everything. So there's definitely like different ways that you can like learn and kind of honor your child's self, and bring that into your craft. So for me, for example, one of the things that I really liked was Cadfile, which is like an old lady show from the 90s about a monk from the 12th century that like solved mysteries using only plant magic, which was like plant and like medicines and stuff. He was like all about healing, and that really drew me to herbalism. So there's actually like an herbal remedy book that is like Cadfile's remedy book, and that's like part of my library. Yeah, it's a Christian monk. Yes, it's all like a historical fiction, but the actual information in it is pretty good, as far as I can tell. And it's something that we had growing up, so it's like really nostalgic for me. So that's something that like you're not going to find in a metaphysical store. It's just something that I had from when I was growing up, and it's one of my favorite things ever. So that's just an example. The next aspect that you can really personalize or is really important and makes your craft unique is the environment that you're in. So I know we touched on this a little bit earlier this week, but I live in a relatively like urban area, I guess. Like I live in the middle of a downtown area. So like there's trees every so often, but it's not like I have this great expanse or even a yard of any kind. So your location really can affect your craft. Like if you live in a place where there are a lot of streams and creeks and rivers, maybe looking into water magic or learning more about American folk magic. I know Appalachian folk magic is a very cool aspect of some people's craft, and if you're from that area, it's something that I'm really interested in learning more about, not necessarily practicing, but just learning more about. And I am in Appalachia technically, I guess, but yeah, it's just like very, very cool to me. And I think that by learning about the old ways of the people who lived here before, and your ancestors, and like how, especially if you're like from the area that you're currently living in, and that goes back a couple generations, it can be something that you can incorporate to your practice. Where I do caution you is maybe don't encroach on native or indigenous practices unless you are of that heritage. So just be safe and respectful, of course. But I think that your environment and the energy of your environment really impacts your craft. And it's up to you to decide how you work with that energy. So yeah. Next thing I want to talk about is being a scavenger, and that does not mean picking up roadkill off the side of the road like I used to do, which is super gross and don't recommend it. It's really stinky. But these days, I don't do that as much. What I mean by being a scavenger these days is really like going to like thrift stores, antique stores, and spending like hours just like looking for tools and things that you can use in your craft. I have found more things in thrift stores and craft stores for like very little that I have at metaphysical stores, and I actually like really love that because it makes my altars that much more personal, that much more like eclectic. I think that aspect of like handpicking things and finding things, like I have this like fantasy of like finding like this sacred text on like a book with like a dusty old bookshelf, with like all this light filtering down. Like, of course, like that's what I always want when I go to thrift stores. But I have found some really, really cool stuff in antique stores, of course. I have found some really great antiques. That's something that I do for my craft. If that's not what you like to do, totally fine. I know a lot of people like to do the more like sleek look for their altars. I like the more like creepy antique look. So that's just my personal preference. It doesn't have to be yours. It's up to you completely. But yes, by scouring like thrift stores, even like the dollar store, like sometimes I know that Dollar Tree has like little tiny jars like this big that I keep my herbs in and stuff, like in a pinch. It's really nice for like on the go spell jars. So it is affordable, it's accessible, and it can be uniquely yours. So by just like looking in unexpected places for witchcraft items, I have a feeling you'll be finding some treasures that you didn't expect but are like a pleasant surprise. Next thing that I wanted to talk about was working with the natural seasonal cycles. So I live in the northern hemisphere, but I do know people who live in like Australia or the southern hemisphere, and I think that a lot of witches and a lot of witch content comes out of people living in the northern hemisphere. So unfortunately, especially when it comes to the wheel of the year, the holidays of course are switched because the seasons are different. So by working with your own natural cycles and maybe not adhering so much to the strict wheel of the year, your craft can become a personal thing. Now, there is a book that I probably should have talked about. I didn't know about it when I first started this, but it's called Year of the Witch, which is like what I named this thing. Again, legitimately did not know about this book prior. And then I saw it and I was like, oh, whoops, I hope this doesn't get confused because I did not write that book. But their book is all about, I believe it's by Temperance Alden, and it's something that I have been meaning to read. I will probably get it next month. But I really like their concept of following like your own natural cycles and like your own wheel of the year versus the like rigid like Celtic fire festivals and equinoxes and stuff like that. So if that is something that you are interested in, I've seen really great recommendations like from credible witches that I follow online and like enjoy watching and like learning from. So if you have picked it up, please let me know what you think about it. I don't want to be like, I recommend it because I've not personally read it, but it does seem like it's a good resource and I do plan on getting it at some point soon. So yes. And then the final thing that I wanted to talk about today is relying on your intuition and UPG. So you might see that term thrown around a lot. UPG stands for Unverified Personal Gnosis, which is basically your own experiences with your craft. I find that a lot of the messages I get are from witches who are like, well, I don't know, I need to make sure that this is a thing that is happening. And I'm like, okay, let's like put aside the analytical for just a second, which is a crazy thing for me to be saying. I know, as a Virgo, it's like not analyzing everything all the time. I know. One of the things that I see is like this mass like anxiety about being wrong. And that is something that I think is deeply rooted in Christianity, where it's like, if you're not practicing this way, you are wrong. And my craft is my own, your craft is your own. If you believe that green brings you healing and peace, I can't say anything about that. I don't see it that way in my practice. A lot of people, like, there are generally accepted rules within witchcraft where like green is associated with prosperity, black is associated with protection, blue with like healing and tranquility, etc., etc. But if you find that something works for you and you're like, it works for me and I got the results, then that's fine. Like, that's just because it works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you, and just because it works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for me. So I think that is something that we are like losing sight of a little bit, at least online. Hopefully we can kind of get away from that in the near future, because like I feel like it's really damaging. Like I feel like people are just like afraid to explore and try things and like make assertions about experiences they've had, because people are going to be like, well, you're not a real witch because I know that this person doesn't present this way, or like this deity doesn't present that way. And how I've seen a lot of that online, and it makes me really sad because I feel like it turns people away from the craft. And I just want you guys to know that your experiences are valid. So just know that. But anyways, I hope this helps you with your witchcraft and like discovering some ways you could possibly personalize your craft. The last thing that I talked about, like especially like relying on intuition and all of that, is super important to me personally. So like, take a deep breath, you guys. You're doing great. And just know that, you're doing great. You're progressing at your own pace. And anyone who tells you you have to practice a certain way in order to be a witch is probably not right. And that you have the right and the ability to practice however you wish. So just take this as a like positive pat on the back to all of my novice practitioners who are watching. You're doing great. I'm really proud of you. Don't worry about like not having the right stuff. It's fine. What you have for right now is perfect for the point that you are in your craft. And when the time comes and you're ready to get more stuff or get more tools or start building an altar, A, these videos will be here, and B, you'll know, and you will be able to, you'll find the items that you need when the time is right, is basically what I'm trying to say. So I hope that helps, and I will see you guys tomorrow.